Hello everyone, this is Nithya and welcome to my channel Nithya's DataLab. In this video, we'll see about partitioning in BigQuery and variety of questions which can be asked under this area. First of all, let's see what is partitioning. Imagine a book or any documentation. Always each content will be segregated or divided under a topic. If we have any specific topic to revise, we'll just go to that topic easily by seeing the index instead of searching the entire book. Now, partitioning concept is very similar to this, where we will divide the data into small manageable parts in a table. This helps us to easily search and navigate to the specific partition without checking the entire table. Now, how to tell BigQuery that you need to partition the table? So for example, you can see a creatable script here which has a partition by clause. So this says partition by sales date. So that means all the same value in the sales date column will be grouped together in a single block. So let's see this table which has sales date, transaction ID, product ID, price and quantity which we have created earlier. Here you can see the sales date column has variety of dates in it as 25th of April, 26th of April and until 29th of April. So for each date we have around 3 to 4 rows in it. When I partition this table using sales date column, all the same date which is 25th of April will be grouped in a single block and 26th of April will be grouped separately and similarly for 27th, 28th and 29th. So now let's see a question. How can you convert a non-partition table into a partition table in BigQuery? For this, you have to create a new partition table and copy the data from your existing table to the new table and finally rename the table if needed. Moving on to the next topic is why we need partitioning in BigQuery table. This is important question because when we are doing something, we need to understand why. There are two major reasons in why we need to partition a table. So the first one is improving the query performance and the second one is storage cost reduction. So now let's see how partitioning will improve the query performance. When we are querying in a table with a partition column as a filter condition, in our example it's sales date. So let's say I want to filter only 24th of April's data. Then it will simply omit other dates and focus only on the rows with 24th of April as sales date. So this is called as partition pruning. Partition pruning is the process of automatically skipping the unnecessary data which we don't need. So the second topic is storage cost reduction of the BigQuery table. When we use partition column and filter condition, BigQuery limits its full table scanning and scan only specific partition. So the number of bytes scanned is reduced, which reduces the query cost. But there is another interesting thing here, which you can tell and see how impressed the interviewers are. Because we all think that partition can improve only query performance, like other traditional data warehouse or databases. But there is another catch here. So let's see a scenario. You have a BigQuery table containing 1 year of data. However, only the last 2 months of data are actively updated or queried on a daily basis. Now the question is, how does a partition table behave differently from a non-partition table in this case? So I've given you the hints. One is to think about the data being scanned and another is to consider the cost and performance difference. First, let's see what will happen when we use non-partition table. Byte scanned will be full table because all the data in the table is not divided into chunks, so BigQuery will scan the entire table. Performance will be slower because BigQuery has to read each row in the table to identify the data you're looking for. Query cost, absolutely it will be higher because we are scanning the full table. Storage type will be active storage. Though we are just modifying the last 2 months of data, BigQuery will consider all the data in the table as active storage because all the data is stored together without any partition in a single block. Storage cost for active storage it will be $0.020 per GB for a month. Secondly, we'll see what happens when we store it in a partition table. Byte scanned will be scanning only the relevant block of partitions because BigQuery will have this metadata of the rows which comes under this particular partition. So it can directly go to that block and fetch the data we need. Performance will be faster because BigQuery know where to look exactly, which reduces the query time. Query cost will be lower. Storage type. The partitions which are modified recently within 90 days would be considered as active storage because we are actively updating, inserting, or deleting those partitions data. The partitions which are not modified for past 90 days would be considered as long term storage. Storage cost for active storage is $0.02 per GB for a month, whereas the partition which comes under long term storage will be costing half of the active storage cost, that is $0.010 per GB for a month. So, I have talked about long term storage and its cost. Now, let's deep dive into it. When a data in a table or partition is not modified for consecutive 90 days, then the data storage will be automatically considered as long term storage. In our previous scenario, we are modifying only recent 2 months of data. If the other 10 months of partition data is not modified in past 90 days, then those data would be considered as long term storage with lower cost. And the frequently modified partition data would be considered as active storage with higher cost. If we modify the old data in a partition, it will be considered under active storage, and for the next 90 days, if it is untouched, then again it will be moved to the long term storage. In this way, partitioning helps us to reduce the storage cost along with the query cost. Let's see an interview question. Does querying data in a long-term storage partition can change it back to active storage in BigQuery? The answer is no. That means when we query the data or read the long-term storage data, BigQuery does not convert it back to active storage. Only modifying the data will convert it to active storage. And our 90 days counter will be reset, and we have to wait for another 90 days without modifying to convert it back to the long term storage. Let's see another question. How to convert a BigQuery table storage to long term storage? This is one of the questions which interviewers can ask. In BigQuery, you don't manually convert storage to long term storage, it's automatic and managed by BigQuery. If a table's data or partition's data is not modified for consecutive 90 days, then BigQuery will consider that data as a long term storage data. Let us see the last question of this video. If a BigQuery table is partitioned, but the query does not include a filter on the partition column, will the query performance and cost be the same as when the partition column is used in the filter column? For this question, let's take a select query, and in the where class we are using a partition column to filter the data, and in the other select query we are not using any partition column in the where class. So the question is whether both the query will perform same and how about its cost. So the answer is no. The query will not perform the same, and it will likely to be slower and expensive because partition pruning will not happen, and BigQuery scans all the partition in our table, so it's expensive. To avoid this, we can make a required partition filter as true. So this will help us to enforce the filtering on partition column. In the upcoming videos, these are the questions which we'll be going through. How can you set partition expiration for housekeeping in BigQuery? What is the maximum number of partitions allowed per table in BigQuery? You have 1 million rows of data. How would you design partitioning for this table? What happens if the number of partition exceeds the allowed limit in BigQuery? What is the maximum number of columns you can use for partitioning in BigQuery? How can you load or modify data that affects more than 5,000 partition in a single operation? So, if you know the answer for this question, let me know in the comment section or we'll see it in the next video. If you like my content, please like this video and subscribe for more.